Hello BRM readers. Just having another cup of tea after yet another slice of Christmas cake. Hope you're enjoying your Christmases too. We thought we'd do something a little bit different this year. So Phil, Howard and myself, we're going to take a look back at 2022 and some of the things that we've featured in the magazine over the course of the year, and look forward to some stuff for 2023. But I thought I'd actually wind the clock back first a little bit and take a look at a layout from about 10 years ago. Probably one of the most wintry scenes that I've ever photographed. That's Jonathan Grant's superb Hudson Road, which many people may recall from seeing around the exhibition circuit in the north, as I say, 10 years plus ago. The layout's retired now, but it's still one of my all-time favourites and seasonally excellent. First thing that we're going to do is take a look back at some of the layouts that we've featured in BRM during 2022. So Howard, what's your favourite?
Penmen Back, featured in the December 2022 issue. Perhaps it's just because I've got a bit of a North Wales coast bias, and it's an interesting era, an era of change on the railways, and I think it's just really well modelled. Now, there was one reader that did decide he was going to write in and argue that it wasn't an Inglenook shunting puzzle, but I do feel, and the creator of that layout as well, it is heavily inspired by the Inglenook shunting puzzle theme. A little bit tacked on the end, of course, but it's a puzzle to work out and a puzzle to operate. How about you?
Me, well, I'm going to go back to the early part of the year, February 2023, with Greg Brooks's Shenstone Road. EM gauge layout, about 26 foot by 8 foot, and it's in a purpose-built building, so a bit bigger than a garage. But what a fantastic scene it actually is. It's based on Black Country of West Midlands in the early 1970s. So that's got the tail end of the hydraulic era, loads of freight workings, throw in a steel works, large station area, and it's just one of those layouts that you could play with all day long and thoroughly enjoy it. And also, as well, between Greg and the team, I mean, the weathering of the stock and the locos is excellent. Plus, there's a lot of individuality and adaptation of ready-to-run items in the stock that's on the layout. And probably it's a close thing between that and his Kia's Hornsey Broadway. If I could sort of like go and pinch somebody else's layout, I think Greg's would be at the top of my list, actually.
You've already done that, Yorkie.
Yeah. What about you, Phil?
Well, I mean, obviously, every layout we photograph for BRM is exceptional, and I think we've had a particularly good year this year for quality layouts. But I think my judgment is usually what would the layout be that I'd want to build. So when I go to a show, I'll pick a layout that I would like to build. And unusually for me this year, with the selection that we've done, it's not a little layout, because I tend to build little layouts, and that's what I like. It was actually a bit of a surprise one. It is Mick Payne's East Derbyshire Mineral Railway, which is a layout that fills his loft, goes around the whole outside of it, and wasn't actually the one I was originally going to photograph. I originally was going to go and photograph his Cranley Estate 009 railway, and Mick said, "Oh, you do realise it's part of a bigger layout?" And in I wonder, and there's this most beautiful layout, all little locos, so that appeals to me, and lots and lots of really interesting detailed scenes. So, you know, as a model, it's beautiful, but I could really enjoy owning that. I think it probably helps that Mick and I have very similar approaches. There's a lot of kit built locos on there, and we spent a lot of time discussing the various kits, some of which we both built. But those locos, they just sat beautifully within the scene. And yeah, I mean, if I was going to fill a loft, I'd be very happy to fill a loft that way.
Are you also similar in enjoying wearing different headgear?
Yes. I wear this. This is my casual headgear for work when I'm at work. Do you not wear your official BRM hat?
Definitely not.
Payne's layout, it blew my brains doing that track plan from the information that you first sent over to me, because it's not a complete layout, a continuous layout, but it's comprised of a series of scenes, isn't it, around the loft?
It is, and it was a confusing track plan, I'll admit. So confusing that other magazines, who we will not mention, got it wrong. We actually put a lot of effort into that. I think I visited twice and had 2 goes at photographing the layout from overhead to make sure we got the track plan absolutely spot on. But there are just some lovely scenes in there. You know, you could sit and watch the railway going over the bridge anytime. There's a series of small stations. I know he has people along to operate it. It must be quite fun having an operating session there. Perhaps we should go back and film one of those.
What, all 3 of us?
Well, maybe not Howard.
Burn.
That's great. So, yeah, so I mean, we've each chosen a layout from this year. What about products, Phil?
Well, I'm going to, because I tend to get all the
It's
weird
going
products.
to be an obscure garden rail wagon, isn't it? Capable of transporting beer and cake.
It's going to be probably the most unusual and interesting thing, and it's going to be slightly difficult for the camera to see. This is a West Hill Wagon Works diesel bogie. It's still got all its 3D print supports in there, but the idea is if you're building a depot scene, then you can have a diesel bogie that looks right rather than a ready to run bogie, which doesn't look like a real diesel bogie. You can have that sat there painted up looking like the real thing. So there's a lovely little scene to be built there, for example, with jacking up a class 47 and a couple of these being wheeled out underneath. I mean, the detail is incredible. They take 50 hours each to do the CAD work on. So it was that was probably the most surprising product that came my way this year.
It's a shame you haven't painted it yet, because when you held it up, it looked like another Christmas decoration that had fallen off your tree.
Well, yeah, it does look. It's slightly difficult to tell, but it is a most amazing thing. And yes, at some point I really must take the supports off and give it a coat of paint. But there's a lot of painting in there because there's a lot of cabling and stuff. So if you do it as a freshly refurbished bogie, the painting is going to be hard.
It looks the part as well.
I've actually seen a photograph of a 7mm one that Brian Daniels posted on RM Web, where he'd really gone to town with the painting and weathering, and it looked absolutely superb. It looked that heavy you couldn't pick it up, but yeah, lovely job. Yeah,
I think that's innovative. Go on, then. What about you?
Me?
Yeah, you get all the shiny boxes.
Say again.
You get all the shiny boxes to review.
No, I don't get all of the shiny boxes, but I do get some really interesting ones come through. And it's been a tough one this year because we've seen obviously a diversity of products coming from an increasing range of manufacturers, as well as the old guard. And I'm still struggling to say which is my favourite out of these, but there are 3 significant ones for different reasons. Bachmann's recent mainline Hunslet, to say that in a 009 loco, the technical achievements of putting a cordless motor with flywheels, Next 18 decoder socket and speaker, firebox glow and a little firebox door that you have to open. I had a dental toothpick out to do it. And you've got all of this in something that's barely 2 inches long. And that's absolutely stunning to have done that. The other thing, again, technical aspects to it, which obviously people will see in this issue of the magazine, is Accurascale's 92. Now, it's not necessarily a loco that sort of like is my era or floats my boat, so it took me by surprise. I mean, the pantographs that operate both with individual motors on DCC, you can control them. Technically superb, all the lighting functions, weighs as much as a house brick, pull your house down. It's got all of those things, but the thing that I didn't expect was to be wowed by the sound of an electric loco. But when I put it onto the track to test it, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was absolutely stunning, all of the clicking and whirring and banging as everything sort of like starts to fire up, noise of the pantographs going up and down, and then you get it in motion, and it's got real depth to it and real personality to the sound. So I look at it now and I think, yeah, I mean, I think sort of like steam sounds are a bit difficult with steam locos, so they don't impress me as much. Yeah, I prefer my sound in diesels, preferably hydraulics, but this as an electric loco really, really did wow me. And then the third thing is a little bit more work-a-day, but it's probably come to the top of the pile for different reasons. And that's Planet Industrial's Victory, where it's a simple, straightforward loco. As an industrial model, yeah, it sort of like ticks boxes for me. But it's probably the best ready-to-run steam loco in terms of its running characteristics. It's brilliant. And well, I know Phil's weakened as well, haven't you?
Yes, I couldn't resist one. I went for the grey one with a lining. The Victory is a particularly attractive class. I like the fact it's fairly short wheelbase, but a large loco on a short wheelbase. Not unlike the LMS dock tanks. So yeah, there is some good stuff there. I'm intrigued that you've got sound in your your electric loco though. Bearing in mind they're nicknamed Dysons. Are you sure it wasn't somebody just vacuuming your office?
Yeah, that'll be a first. Somebody vacuumed in the office. Right. Yeah. What about you, Howard? Products?
Probably Hornby's 9F. Fantastic model. I mean, seeing the photographs of it and watching it in action, towing the 1K tender, brilliant. The models that are fitted with the mechanical stoker, again, detail inside the cab is really something to see. And I suppose with the 9F, you get all of that exterior pipework, which was a big part of those classes in later BR builds, and it's all really, really well captured, but not in a flimsy way. I think it's one of those models that you could handle quite easily without things dropping off left, right, and centre. The only other one that really sort of made me think, that really impressed me, and it's literally just arrived last week, was and again from Hornby, it's the Princess Coronation, but die-cast version. Really does have some heft to it, that model. And despite, I suppose for me, die-cast, I still think back to die-cast cars, cheap die-cast cars where you've got all the flash metal around the windscreens and it's sort of dunked in some paint and it comes out and it's all hanging around the model. But the way that they've hidden the fact that it's all die-cast, and it's just completely, you wouldn't know, it could quite easily be plastic. Really, really good model. And I do wonder sometimes, is die-cast the future for a lot of our models? Because it was the one gripe that many kit builders still had with their white metal kits. They'd always do a pulling power test off, and it would be, well, kit built locomotive, yes, okay, you've constructed it and all the rest of it, but it can still outperform a ready to run model when it comes to hauling coaches. These die-cast models now, they're really up there, and sometimes I think might actually exceed the hauling powers of something kit built.
So how much more powerful is sort of like a die-cast Duchess like that than the plastic version, or sort of like the A3 or A4 or the things that we've seen? How much more powerful are they then?
Probably get another 7 to 8 coaches behind it.
Right.
The problem is with a lot of these, I mean, especially things like the 9F that we found, is that running around on little by them, you get to the point on curves where your wagons have a tendency to want to come off the track before the actual locomotive. It's not exactly like up there with the big boy that we tested that came through from Rivarossi. You know, it's not quite there yet, but you know, diecast, I do think it's got an increasing part to play in the models.
Yeah. So is the detail any worse for being die-cast than the previous plastic iterations?
I don't. Well, some people might say that there have been compromises, but where I think die-cast has its pros is in the overall body shape, your main boiler, your you know, firebox, things like that. Small detail has always got to be injection molded or bits of wire, I think. You know, you can't die cast things like that yet, but yeah, I think the more die cast models that we see in the future, the happier I'll be.
Is the trend going to be, though, for perhaps slightly less detail and a bit more robustness? Because there's a lot of people say that's what they want. They complain that you know, bits that it's got lots and lots of tiny bits on which they knock off, and also, quite frankly, a lot of the locos now are so much better than the layouts they're running on. Priority has got to be really given to make the thing move properly, and I think die-cast ones will have that a slight advantage, perhaps.
I think the problem that you've got with plastic is that you need a minimum wall thickness in your tooling to accommodate for strength. So for things like boilers, and as you start to fit more and more things inside a locomotive, the opportunities for having those great big die-cast lumps on your chassis, which take up so much volume, decrease. So if we want to keep adding more and more functions to models, I think die-casting the superstructure is certainly a way to help add or retain at least weight to the model.
Interesting. I mean, we do get a lot of shiny things. Now, I mean, people always saying, "Oh, the hobby's all dying and everything," but we keep seeing more and more stuff. But I think I've got to. Can I have an extra mark here for the weirdest product I got sent this year, which I haven't had a chance to use yet? But it's Humbrol Smart Mud, or Smart Mud. Which, let's be honest, it looks, if I'm being generous, it looks like cookie dough in there. Do not eat this, kids. It's a very light. Now I'm going to all over my fingers. Very light substance that you can form terrain with. So I've got to do a bit of testing with that, because I'm not actually. It's one of those things that's come through. It's new, so I'm not actually sure what to do with it yet. I've got to go and work out what I'm going to do with it. But it's interesting that there's still innovation endlessly innovation in the hobby.
I'm sure you'll come up with some bright idea for that, Phil. But just as we've been talking about different products from the year, it's opportune to mention that in the new year on RM Web and via BRM and World of Railways, that you'll be able to cast your votes for the products of the year, along with other categories, in our BRMA awards. So you can have your say on the products too. But Phil's leading there into practicals, and we always have some good practical content in the magazine, and I think there's been some great stuff this year. So no, you can't choose any of yours, Phil, but what have your favourites been that you've seen?
Well, that's really difficult. You didn't say I wasn't allowed to choose any of mine, but I think I'm going to go for Jamie Warren's chocolate box scene, which he did a few months ago, which is possibly the largest practical we've ever done, ever hosted, where he went through and he built a Ford and some buildings around it, and it was a proper sort of 1950s English village. Would expect to see Miss Marple, the district nurse will be cycling around, Vicar will have his car parked somewhere, and you've got, but the level of detail he went into was incredible, and you could really follow all the steps and then take out bits that you particularly want to do. But I have to say, there have been some really excellent practicals. Having said that, right, I am going to choose one of my own. And that has to be from Garden Rail, and it has to be building a live steam Peckett.
Oh, you've never mentioned this before.
No, because it's the biggest and most exciting practical I've done. I've probably ever done. It's also possibly the most stressful and definitely the most oily that I've ever done.
How much did that cost, and how long did it take you?
I think there are about 35 hours in there, and it's about 1,600 quid for the kit. Now, the whole point, the reason it came my way to build was because they wanted to prove that a non-engineer could build a live steam loco. Can they? Yes, but with a little bit of help. So I did talk to a few people while I was doing this and get a few pointers along the way, which are all in the articles in Garden Rail. So it's a four-part building Garden Rail. I'm literally taking you through all the steps. So things like running it on air, which I used an airbrush compressor for, because I'm not an engineer. I don't have a lot of tools, a lot of very specialist tools, but it's all spanners, nut runners, screwdrivers, pair of tweezers to pick all little bits, because there's an awful lot of little bits in there. But at the end of the day, and I think this is the important thing, is there's very little cost difference between buying a kit and buying the ready to run loco. But I built it, and I've run it. I've had it out on the track a couple of times at different people's tracks, and the pleasure of saying I built that and I ran it. I think that's the key with all of the practicals, is that you go back to it and you look at it and go, yeah, I made that. And to me, that's the whole point of a lot of the practicals we do in the magazine. It's not about ownership. It's about the journey, the journey along the way.
All right, yeah, you managed to get that one on. We'll give you that anyway. So yeah.
Look, I don't get one of those every year. It's gonna get in there. It's got to be in there, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What about you, Howard?
I'd actually have to pick one of Phil's. So recycling an old layout. I think it shows for a lot of people who've built something, especially the serial layout builders, or people who they want to change, they want a fresh change of the layout, but they don't want to have to go through the arduous process of relaying track and all the fiddly bits like setting up the point motors all the time. I think it shows how you can very cost effectively rebuild something and make it very presentable once more for the exhibition circuit. I mean, you completely rebuilt that one, Phil, but it could easily be a partial rebuild of it, or refreshing a layout. After about 10 years, depends where you store your layout. Layouts can start to look a bit tired, and getting rid of the dust, people say, is easy with a vacuum cleaner. And we've covered this a few times in the magazine, but despite all your best efforts, it never quite looks brand new, does it? I think it's still got that tint of dust in the trees or in the hedges and things like that. It needs a refresh at some point. So you can tell us more about that, given that you did it. But
the point was that basically I got an old layout that it's only 75 centimeters long. It's not a big layout, and I need it was just sitting there doing nothing. So it was fun to build it. It was fun to take it, do something completely different, fill it full of JS models warehouses along the back, turn it from a countryside scene to an urban scene. And I think this is possibly also the future in a way, because even if you're not recycling your own layout, then you can recycle a second-hand layout, because there are often people selling layouts there, and you can pick them up for very little money. Now, if it works, that's a lot of the hard work done for you. And a lot of people are nervous about wiring and track laying. Well, if somebody's already done that, then you can scrape all the scenery off, do the scenery bits, and thoroughly enjoy it. I mean,
a great way to save money as well, because despite what anybody will tell you, you never get the money back that you've spent on track or point motors and things like that.
You absolutely never get the money back on that. But it also means that if you want to sell your layout, hopefully this creates a pool of willing buyers, because a lot of people it's throwing a layout away is really difficult. But selling it on to somebody who's going to give it another life, that's a lot easier emotionally. So that's I think that's where you need to be on that one. So go on then, Andy. You are a man who's bought a layout, and
yes,
and he's gradually installing it in his shed very slowly, because there's not many photos we're seeing, are there?
Again, I mean, it's one of my resolutions for next year to actually get something done, because once again, I said that 12 months ago, and I'm still rewiring the layout. It's actually part of Jeff Taylor's earlier Cambrian Empire with sort of like Dolgethley Goods Yard, which is quite a large and very, very heavy layout. So obviously work will move forward on it. And as soon as obviously I start plonking a few industrials on it, that yeah, I'll start to get a bit fired up about it. But yeah, it's a difficult thing taking on somebody else's layout sometimes. But as long as you change it and sort of like put your stamp on it rather than just living with it as was. But yeah, just I mean, obviously we've been talking about practicals, and I chose another Jamie Warren one. I mean, it was the modelling the river scene and the bridge. I mean, he's absolutely brilliant as a modeler. Very, I don't know. I mean, people say, oh, yeah, sort of like, oh, it's dying out. There's no younger people in the hobby. And Jamie is at the younger end of the spectrum. Tremendously creative, not just in a modelling context, but his presentation of things as well. And obviously, he's starting to work with us a little bit more on photography of layout side. I really like what he does, but that for me was a lovely little scene. So good on you, Jamie. But it's also the same as well that sort of I always look forward to seeing prototype articles from Clive Baker. He puts sort of like so much into sort of like the research and the resources behind it to illustrate what he's actually explaining in there. And there's been a couple sort of like there from Clive this year on footbridges and tunnels, which I think have been excellent reference material. So was there anything that you caught your eye then, Howard?
Yeah, one from David Ratcliffe, a prototype in the park it's called. We ran this one in the May issue. It just shows really that with the wealth of little ready-to-run shunters that we've got now from a variety of different manufacturers, coupled with a number of new ready-to-run wagons, how somebody on a very short piece of track with a few points and a few sidings could create a nice little industrial scene, a little bit similar in style really to the building of Runcorn Salt Union, where we had roads sort of crossing over. I think it's just you see an article like that and you think, oh, I could build that, or it just spurs on ideas and creativity, I think. How about you, Phil?
Well, I to be honest, embarrassingly, I'm going to go for the same one because it's I love little industrial locos, and that nailed it for me. That was the sort of thing I buy books of. You know, when you look at books on stands, especially the ones that are designed to be bought as presents for enthusiasts, they're invariably 3/4 views of of express locos running by, and they absolutely leave me cold. But though the photos of Trafford Park there, they were proper working steam in that environment, and I thought I'd like to build that. That's the sort of thing I like having a crack at. So
every time he shakes his head, he jiggles.
Oh
no. Well, it was Andy who insisted wearing Christmas wear, so so I thought I better. But
I did make an effort though. Have you noticed I've got a little bit of tinsel there, and I didn't bother with a Christmas tree this year, the full one, but I've got a little diddy one just for the camera. There you go. Don't say I don't make an effort.
Well,
Christmas
that looks
jumper
like
as well.
it's fallen off your TVR dashboard, that Christmas tree.
Oh, is that
Oh
is that
no,
a
that was the other day. That was the other day.
Yeah. No, it's funny that you do look at these things, and certain I think industrial scenes, maybe they just happen to be about the right sort of time that people are starting getting colour film that was more common. And that there's a lot of, despite it being a grimy scene, very often there's a lot of colour in there, which works which I think stands out on the page.
So we've had a look at BRM and sort of like picked out sort of like some of our favourite bits, but I mean, let's not forget there's more to our railways department. And if you're a World of Railways Plus member, that you get access to not just BRM, but traction, narrow gauge world, engineering in miniature, and something called Garden Rail too.
It's a weird magazine, that one.
Yeah, it's a quality publication where we do a lot of making things. That's it, because I think that's the beauty of World of Railways Plus, especially, is that you can dabble with different magazines. You know, there are bits of each magazine that I really enjoy. Would it be enough for me to buy them in Smiths or whatever? Quite often not. or my interests will change over time. So the ability of having all the magazines all the magazines back numbers sitting there, I think that's a really
the
great
ability
thing.
to search through them as well.
Yes,
So if
because
there's an obscure thing that you want to search, or there's something you're not quite sure about, then you can just take out a trial membership, give it a go.
I think, yeah, that's great, because as your interests change over time, it will differ. I'm going to say that since I'm not allowed to vote for Garden Rail as one of my favourites, I am going to go for Narrow Gauge World, because I really enjoy the news coverage. Obviously, I do love the Isle of Man, and frequently there's some Isle of Man stuff in there, so that suits me. But I do think the news coverage is excellent, and it sort of I really don't understand how Andrew pulls all this stuff together. But you suddenly find little bits of the world that you didn't know about, because there's foreign news in there as well, and quite often I'm looking at that thinking I'd like to go and see that for real. So I think there's an inspiration for getting out of the house and going and seeing some of these places and enjoying these lines in there.
How about you, Andy?
Well, predictably, perhaps I'd go for traction, particularly some of David Hayes' articles in there. That there's been, I mean, a couple more this year. The ones referencing trick workings around the West Midlands area, T42, which was in 2 parts. It's great reference material, and as you touched on there, Howard, you can search for stuff, because what's not of interest one month might be of interest to you a year or so down the line, and it's dead easy to go back and look for stuff. So if you think, oh well, what's in there sort of like to do with Bilston, tap it in, see what you find, and you'll come out with all sorts of stuff. So I find it very easy to get lost in traction in retrospect rather than at the moment. So it's a great resource. But you're going to go for something weird in engineering, are you, Howard?
I am definitely. Yeah, you know me off by heart. Engineering in miniature, a specific article actually, because when you were setting this up, you did actually say, pick out a specific article. Well, I picked out one. It's called "Having a Wheelie Good Time." It's by a chap called Harry Bilmore, and it's all about remachining worn tyres on wheel sets. I just found it interesting. It covers a few things, like some areas, some tyres which have had hard welded spots on, and it's not machining out as evenly as he'd like, and how he's sort of overcome that. And I just did take an interest in reading things like that. I haven't got a lathe out the back. I've no intention of turning my own wheel sets, because by the time I've learnt, it's cost me 4 or 5 times more than it would have cost for somebody else, because I've had to go through don't know how many blanks just to get it right. I think it's one of those things, engineering like that and learning on lathes, that you're better off having somebody beside you that's done it before, knows how to do it, and can show you the process as you work on your piece. So I just found that was an interesting article. But
I think along those lines, actually, in engineering miniature, the technical editor and who works for the Fairbourne Railway, his column every month about about all the problems he's found keeping the railway working. I find that fascinating. A lot of it goes over my head, because as I mentioned, I'm not an engineer, but I am interested in the sort of bodges and tweaks and repairs of bodges that he has to do. And I think again, this is one of those where World of Railways Plus scores, because if you're not an engineer, this is still very, very readable. But again, it's probably not enough to get you to buy a single issue for every month. More importantly, you don't want to store all those single issues, so you could go back if you sign up for World of Railways Plus, you could go back and read a year's worth of those and be and get a better understanding of what it takes to run a narrow gauge railway.
Yeah, I mean, the other bit, obviously, part of the Empire is sort of like more my world, is RM Web, and obviously sort of like Phil's on there a lot too. Howard drops by occasionally, but
very occasionally,
and gets maligned by folk. But when you stop and look at some of the things that have been on there, there's some superb content, and for me, that it's sort of like the one that keeps on giving is the show is yours, realistic modelling topic within the the BRM area. There's some stunning stuff. I mean, you can always rely on Kevin Fair and Quintus and numerous people sort of like posting stuff in there. Absolute superb modelling. Whether it's realistic or not, sometimes doesn't necessarily matter. But when you look at sort of like some of the modelling skills that's there, and there's 168 pages to plough through, sort of like taking a good look at stuff, and you can't fail to find some inspiration in there. But Phil goes into sort of like some deep and dark corners of the site, though.
Well, I do. I mean, yeah. I mean, a couple of years ago, we ran the Cake Box Challenge via RM Web, and you know, I mean, obviously, we haven't run a Cake Box Challenge for over a year. But you know what? People are still posting stuff in there. They're still building cake boxes. So it set people off. And every so often, I drop in there, and you'll see some new and fascinating modelling going on. So you know, it's the thing I love about RM Web is it is a bigger community than we expect, and I think also that aside from the model railway side, there's a lot of other topics get discussed in there. So you know, there's this whole sort of men's sheds thing where they're encouraging men to talk about stuff. And not to say that everybody on RM Web is male, but there is definitely some conversation goes on there at all sorts of times. Quite frequently about sausages and that sort of thing as well at events. There's all sorts of food jokes go on there. But that's what I love about it. It's different. Yeah.
Favorite, well, best RM Web content, I would have to say, and I've only just sort of come across it past couple of days, is a layout called L'Heure Bleue. And we can sort of get away with this because it's World of Railways TV since I renamed it from BRM TV. Yeah, French.
Is that one? About to say, is that one of your foreign layouts there, Howard?
It is a French. Buildings are plenty. Signage on the shops, which sort of oozes the sort of French, you know, typical little artisan shops that you would get in the average town. Great patina on the buildings, and it's got an infrastructure that's sort of inspired by the Nor region. So, yeah, I've just been. I mean, it's been ongoing since about 2018, the build. But I just drop in and have a quick look and see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the builder of that, Al, goes by the name Barry 10 on RM Web. And yeah, as you say, search for it, L'Heure Bleue. What I like that Al does is his impressionistic back scenes, where it's different layers of buildings. It reminds me very much of a local artist, you know, sort of like in decades gone by, in sort of like the potteries area. It's really effective sort of like back scene portrayal, and it adds to that atmosphere, that sort of like slightly misty, grimy thing. But I mean, you should have come down to Taunton in April because Al did bring L'Heure Bleue along to Staple Grove Village Hall, and I think for a lot of people it was one of the highlights of the RM Web year, as ever, getting back to sort of like having a members day there. And I know, Phil, you were busy that weekend, weren't you?
Well, yes, I was, because you weren't very well at all. So I had to be standing Andy York a lot of time. But yeah, I remember L'Heure Bleue, and there's the thing about that little members day is it's something I've really got into this year, is small events. You know, I've gone to quite a lot of small events where they are, you know, village hall type things, and it's all, you know, a smallish group of people, and it's very friendly, and there's usually some good cakes, so that's always good. But you get some interesting chat, and you see stuff that you don't see at the major shows, and of course you haven't got the pressure of trying to get round them all. So that's been, you know, that's been my sort of standout this year, is, you know, moving on from the RM Web members days to all these little events to go and find. And I tracked, you know, every so often you track down a real surprise where somebody's brought a layout out that is going to be, you know, popular on the exhibition circuit, but they've got to build it, they've got to throw it in the back of the car and bounce it around somewhere. So you take it to a little event in a village hall where if it doesn't work properly, nobody's going to moan too much, and you're not going to feel too guilty. You know, those are great.
Taunton, I mean, along with sort of like some other smaller events around the country as well, one of its byproducts is actually raising a bit of money for charities as well. And over the years, I mean, there's been sort of like a good few thousand raised for local charities and health charities. So there's that aspect of doing a bit of good whilst you're enjoying yourself there, as well as eating cake all day and pasties.
Or sausage rolls at Hinckley, where they were raising money for children in need that weekend. And yet there was the most amazing Playmobil G-scale layout there. And a contact of mine who actually, interestingly, has refurbished his G-scale layout for at least 3 times. It used to be English, then it was Cuban, and now it's a British loco shed, but with lots and lots of G-scale locos running around on ready-to-run chassis. But everything from Edward from the Thomas series, a Decapod, and the Battersea 040040 Garrett, all scratch built, running around on this. So it's you turn that and go, wow, like a bit of that.
Talking of weird things and liking things, another thing that we've got on RM Web over the Christmas period is Brian McDermott and the 00 Pole team. Their wish list, which is actually returned this year, where people can vote for their choices, what they'd like to see in the future from manufacturers. Voting is underway now through to the 30th of December. So if you have a little time left over the Christmas period, that's worth dipping into. But then moving into the new year, and sort of like Howard's moment of glory that he's been down to Margate to get all of the news of sort of like Hornby's announcements for 2023. So what have you got planned for that then, Howard?
You'll have to wait and find out.
Yeah.
Check out World of Railways, January the 10th. All goes live then.
January the 10th is the day. Then basically, we've let you out of the office, and you've been down to chat to Margate. Did they give you good cake?
The cake was awesome. Yeah, sandwiches were good. Yeah, well looked after as usual.
Yeah, and that's all he can tell us, basically, isn't it?
That's all. That's all you.
What else are you looking forward to next year then? Any New Year's resolutions?
No New Year's resolutions for me. No. I've got a big house project on the go at the back at the moment, making an extension. So over there, I don't know what the neighbours will think, but during sort of Christmas and New Year's, I've got a mini digger and a powered dumper sort of whirring away in the back garden. So
yeah, I've just got to raise this one. I remember when everybody had sort of like a long weekend for the Queen's funeral. What did you do, Howard?
Oh yes, well I was tackling the concrete foundations from the old conservatory with a jackhammer.
That one going well.
Yeah. What were you sitting there going? Can you hear the gun salute? Yeah, I don't know.
I was making progress. But talking about sort of looking back on the year though, what are your favourite memories from 2022?
I think it's actually been going back to shows and seeing people that we've not seen for 2 to 3 years. And sometimes, I mean, obviously you see that many people that they may have changed a bit, or they may have changed their shirt or something, but you don't recognise them initially. So there's that. But also mixed in with people where you carry on the same conversation that you started 3 years ago when you last saw them. So it's been a case of that. It's just been so nice to see so many people again.
Yes, I must admit, going back to shows has made a huge difference to me, because I really, really missed it, far more than I expected. I didn't realise just how I knew I was missing it. I didn't realise how much I was missing it. And recently we've just had Worley, where we've had a new stand where we've had the team on the stand, which is great fun. We chatted to loads of people. We gave away sweets. We gave away books. People asked about the modelling we got on the stand. You know, it was really, really great to meet readers and potential new readers and people who are in the magazine. I mean, yeah, it was quite funny because Redbridge Wharf, which was featured in the magazine at the time, their layout was there, and they all trotted along to see us. And although we'd given them a couple of copies, as we always do, everybody trotted up and wanted to buy another copy because they allow us in there. And I think it's really easy for us to sort of we see somebody take the photos of their layout and get the write up, and then once it's in the magazine, that's it done and dusted for us. And we sort of, yeah, we've walked away from it probably a month before everybody else because we move on. To go back and actually to finish the story where they are, yeah, they're telling you how pleased they are with the way it looks in the mag is it's just wonderful, and it sort of spurs you on to do better each time.
Yeah, we've got a great one coming up in that regard in the spring issue. Pete Goss's Copper Walk Brewery, which I know you like that one as well, Phil.
Yeah, I'm slightly jealous you've got photographed that one.
Oh no, I kept that one for myself. I mean, it's a lovely layout to photograph, and obviously did a nice bit of filming with Pete. And it's a really informative video where he tells you so much about how he's actually done things. And it ties in obviously with the book he's got coming out and so on. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that one in the mag in spring.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in the layouts I'd like to build category. Copper Walk there. We've got a lot. We have got a lot of good stuff coming up, and I'll be honest, I've lost track because our planning spreadsheet, to be fair, now runs several months ahead, and so we've got a lot of layouts in the bag. Which, yeah, and there's other ones lined up. I mean, I've been to see Splot, which is something I saw at the DMU show, and I photographed it in a really, really nice model railway room. I was very envious of that. But it's again, it's industrial. It's set in Wales. It's lovely, and a really interesting project there.
Excellent.
There you go.
So I think there's always going to be stuff. There's always going to be stuff we're looking forward to. But what always the great thing about it is we don't. Part of it is we don't know what we're going to trip over. We don't know what we're going to see at the next show, or emailed in, or appearing on RM Web in the future. Yeah, that's the joys of what we do, and the joys of the hobby is that there's always something for everybody.
Well, that's a good point actually. If you've got something different or something excellent or something that's hidden, get in touch with us because we'd like to find out a bit more about it.
I think it's just if you've got something you're proud of, we like to see people's model railways. It's just that simple. We like to see them, and if you're enjoying it, then you're doing your hobby right. So send us a photo.
Or heritage sites, or
Yes.
anything else for that matter. If it's railway related, just get in touch with us. We don't mind touring places. I mean, a couple of highlights for me this year was checking out the Dapple factory, or lighting up that locomotive at Stapleford Park, or
or cleaning the muck off ourselves as we got halfway around.
Yeah, we got covered
filming
on that
it,
one.
balanced as we were on a flat car.
Yeah, the lens of the camera was absolutely caked in it, and
yes. But wasn't it a good day? Weren't they really nice people?
Very, very hospitable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Dapple, the enthusiasm came across. But I think that generally happens with the manufacturers, is that people underestimate just how enthusiastic the people who make our models are. But Dapple were great. I mean, yeah, they let me build an O-gauge wagon, which was just wonderful. I have built an O-gauge wagon, sat there. They haven't hired me for the job, so I wasn't very quick.
No.
If you're the unlucky customer that's got that wagon, you can return it to.
Yeah, it'll be the one that falls apart when you take it out of the box. But no, it was very well set up, and it's enjoyable to see. So
it was fascinating.
Making Tracks 2 was another good one as well, from Pete at Chester Cathedral. Looking forward to seeing what he's got planned in the new year.
Yeah. So I think the thing is there is a lot out there. There's going to be a lot out there in 2023. All being well, should be another bumper year of new toys, new models to go and look at. We know, yeah, we've turned up so many new and interesting layouts this year that people have been working on in the last couple of years, and that's going to carry on for a while because there's still, you know, people haven't quite finished it, and it'll suddenly pop up in 2023.
I think Phil's summed up the forthcoming year quite well there. It's going to be an interesting one, and we'd just like to say Happy New Year to you, all of our readers. I hope it's a good one, and I hope you enjoy what we get up to next year. So thank you very much. I think it's time for another mince pie or a slice of Christmas cake. I'm sure Phil's got one to hand.
I'm sure he has.
Yeah, we'll see you next month.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.